let's cycle back into
some intensity
and go with the other Steve who calls in
relatively
frequently.
Oh my
Steve
God!
from New York.
We are really not worried about demonetization this episode. We're talking about
at all.
whiteness.
All right, Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, been a while.
Yeah.
How are you?
You know, so there is someone, Kathleen Moncrief in the live chat says, as much as I will miss the show, it's really nice to see that they're honoring their own boundaries and needs and doing what's right for them. Looking forward to whatever they do next. And that is the goal, is we are honoring our boundaries and needs. That's a really good way of putting it, and feeling really good about it. You know, it feels like I'm being let off the leash to do more cool shit.
Also, it's nice to have a goodbye show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a social worker, so as soon as I hear somebody talking about burnout, I'm like, yeah, I get it.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
All right, Stephen, let's dive in.
To whiteness? Hold
How
on.
should we approach the conversation about whiteness?
Okay, whiteness and social constructs.
Yes.
This is a skeptic show. Why are we talking about? You can't be a skeptic about whiteness. Sorry, I just want to address this before it comes up.
Yeah,
that is the comment that I see most often. Guess what, motherfuckers? Skepticism is an approach, and if you're not being skeptical to something like that, then that is an extra nudge to fucking look at it.
Yep.
So
nothing is off limits when it comes to this topic. All right, Steve, what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are this. I think that there is a issue in how critics of whiteness approach it. I am a huge critic of whiteness. I don't think that whiteness is a thing that should be an overarching umbrella in terms of how one should identify, but at the same time, not giving up the ideas of, that we have to also be critique of white privilege and other things that come out of it.
Right.
So here's my main crux. As a leftist who says, whiteness as a whole doesn't exist, because if we go to Europe, they don't call themselves white. They hardly call themselves European, especially if you go to the UK. There isn't this line that they draw very often where they're like, this is white culture, because when you go over there, if you go to the UK, the culture is very different than if you go to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And their cultures are so different that it would be hard to tell which is, what would be white culture in that point. My critique is that, however, if we're looking at it that way and we say, okay, whiteness is something that we should dismantle, we also seem to use it as a cudgel. And I don't know, V, if you've come across this yet, but I definitely have in my atheo paganism, and I don't know if you've done it, if it's happened to you in your atheo witch stuff. But like this cudgel of this is white culture. I've even been called a cultural appropriator because I'm an atheo pagan and not a straight pagan.
I have too. Yeah. That's the stupidest argument on the face of the planet. But yes, continue. Yeah.
Wait, people call you tourists because
we are appropriating paganism because we're atheists.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's like, as opposed to, wait, what were the pagans actually, oppressed for? Because they weren't. It's terrible.
LARPer. Oh my gosh, that's okay. So go on, you two. I'm just going to listen. I have an opinion on whiteness, but I don't want to talk over. So go on, please.
This is now very awkward as the only person of color being like, I have an opinion, but please go on.
Eric to be part of this too, because as far as I know, the cudgel has also been used on Eric, who has been classified as white passing. What it turns into, and I think this is an optics thing where, a lot of people who practice paganism, or even if they, for example, I go to Scottish Highland Games very often, wear my kilt and do all that sort of thing. And even there, there is this thought of whiteness as a thing that they need to keep to, even though the original concept of whiteness being just Anglo-Saxons and that's it. It wasn't the French, it wasn't the Spanish, it was Anglo-Saxons were considered white, and then it slowly spread from there. Even Germans, it weren't considered white for
I mean, Saxons are kind of in the same category. Well, not necessarily the tribes themselves, but
even Ben Franklin said that the Germans were I forget the term he used, but was
Ben Franklin making fun of the Germans, the World War II version of Seth Meyers making fun of Donald Trump at
the colony version? World War II is much later. God.
Okay, Steve, I do want to kind of cut to the chase here and clarify my part in this conversation so that we can give Eric kind of the lead out. For me, there is a really good reason why a lot of people, especially fellow leftist white pagans, are very suspicious, and perhaps overly so, of people who are working with a culture that has since been co-opted into representing whiteness. So a good example of that is a lot of Viking imagery today is very, the aesthetic has been co-opted by really awful people who are promoting white supremacy. And so it is very difficult for a lot of Norse pagans who are absolutely antithetically opposed to that to make that establishment clear. And some people have been like, oh, I guess I can't present in this way anymore. Other people I have friends who are like, no, I'm going to go as full Viking as I possibly can. And also make sure that my coat is covered in fuck Nazi pins. Just making sure as you are diving into this, that you aren't cutting yourself off from your heritage. If you are a Norse, if you are, Irish like I am, or whatever your ethnicity is, there is value in breaking down what the construct of whiteness asks you to see yourself as, and say, no, actually there's something underneath that is actually valuable, that rejects a lot of the oppressive moral structures that whiteness has put on top of it. That said, you have to be really careful because it is a pipeline to the alt-right a lot of the time if you aren't super careful. I actually have been tweeting a lot about red flags to watch out for if you are brand new to this and you're trying to navigate that. I want to celebrate my Scottish Highlander, background and also not accidentally end up at a Klan rally. Then there are ways to do that. But because it is so tenuous, a lot of people just opt out completely and have a lot of suspicion for people, rightly so. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that whole thing.
Yeah. Do you remember when Italians were ethnic? Pepperidge Farms remembers. Look.
Talk about a holiday. Let's loop this back into the holidays. If you watch,
which one?
It's a Wonderful Life. The most they have the funniest garlic eater slang for Italian people. And it's very funny to watch what whiteness is shift and change to make sure that it's always about power.
The Irish weren't considered white until what, the 1940s, 1950s?
Yeah, when, Catholic.
Actually, 1960s when JFK became president was when somebody wrote in a newspaper article, oh, by the way, now we can consider white people or Irish people white.
Yeah. So my view on it is that I don't feel like I have a stake necessarily in the way that a lot of white people do. Because I find myself kind of excluded from the conversation in some important and I think sometimes really necessary ways. So I can give just a brief little picture of that. And that is that for a lot of people who are watching from outside of the United States, and there are tons, by the way, I looked this morning, it turned out that our podcast is number 6 in religion on Apple Podcasts in Norway. Damn. And actually got up into the single digits for a lot of other countries. And they're looking at this going, what the fuck is whiteness? Because it's largely an American concept. And really to get even more granular, it's a colonization concept. It is something that you see and have seen in different, like, Spain going to the Philippines, right?
I mean, Norway
there's this,
also dabbled in that.
Yes, but I mean, I was going to lead into how it's changed into this over, slavery and things like that. People wanting to look like they're colonizers because they got preferential treatment and proximity to whiteness and the privilege that comes with that. I think that as somebody who is mixed race, I'm not included in the conversations with people who are going, how are we going to talk about our whiteness? Because they're like, okay, that's not you. And it's definitely interesting to see. I think that as we move forward, what I would love to see is people contextualizing it, because I feel like we treat whiteness as a monolith, and what it is much more small and petty. And I want to see the conversation move into treating it as small and petty, because, just as we talked about, whiteness changes. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of frustrating. I've seen lots of conversations saying, online, and people have even said it to me, that, only white people can be racist. Even with those definitions, that is an America-centric, United States-centric term that doesn't take in the context of how racism plays out with people who aren't fucking United States. And that exists in the world, right? There's more than just people in the United States. There's more than white people in the United States. And it feels like this conversation is being had that white people will think that they are fucking ubiquitous across the planet, and that the implementation of whiteness across the world is somehow the United States is just a microcosm of that. And it feels, again, like it's being treated like a monolith. When the fact is, if there are people alive today who, when they were born, Irish people were not white, right? There is that shift, and continuing to address it. I think that, I don't know, it feels like it's making it to be a big monster, and bigger monsters are harder to slay. And I think that the more we see it for the petty bullshit that it is, the better we can address it and feel like we can actually make change.
Yeah, a big point of that is, like, I grew up in upstate or in the Northeast country, right? Mm-hmm. But my cultural values are very similar to other people that are not considered white, that grew up in the same place. But if I put myself with someone who grew up in, rural Mississippi or Alabama, our cultural values are going to be completely different, or even our just fundamental values are going to be very different, even though we both share a skin color. And even just the way that we perceive the world is completely different.
Yeah, and it will continue to change. And right now we see in the United States, a social division that you can paint in those stark colors. But like Jesse Clark in the live chat has said, and it's just making me facepalm, it's not all black and white. Maybe that's a good starting place, but the nuance of the conversation needs to be addressed as well. And I'm glad we're doing it. And we're not losing sight of the fact that we still have work to do. And I hope that people watching can continue to deconstruct and see what that means, and have meaningful conversations in the future about it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for calling in, Steve. We really appreciate getting to talk to you so often.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys as well, Eric. I'm sorry that we're not going to continue to be able to flirt until you guys get back. But alas, such is the way of life. And I'm in your Discord server, and I also have thought about doing streaming for myself, but as a social worker, it becomes problematic in terms of, I
can imagine.
I was going to be a school psychologist until this, and then I found out that was
Imagine being like 11 years old and having a really bad day and getting to go talk to Eric about it. Like, those 11-year-olds are missing out.
But all it takes is one angry parent 5 years later
Exactly.
Yep.
So, Steve, thank you for calling in.
doing
It's
what
been
you're
wonderful getting to meet you
Okay.
and have these conversations with you.
Of course. I'll still talk to you guys Discord. So thanks for everything, and talk to you later.
Sounds
Take
good.
care.
Bye.